All right, time to get stuck into the biggest stories in Australia today with the help of Alex Malley, who's a best-selling author, financial lecturer and disruptor. Lyle Shelton is a Conservative commentator, fellow ADH-TV host as well, and National Director of Family First. Gentlemen, welcome to you both.
Thank you very much, Smithy.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be with you.
I'll start with you, Alex. Should we be freezing all Gaza visas and start scrutinising the Hamas sympathisers from Gaza?
Well, I have to say, Chris, before I start, that I'm the product of migration. So I think migration's a good thing, but it's a good thing when there are three things in place. A strategy for why you have an immigration policy, that you absolutely own that strategy, and that the people you bring into our country are integrating and integrate with our culture.
Yes.
So I think as a foundation, my parents came into Australia many years ago under those guidances. Today, I think we've lost our way, and we need to obviously be very thoughtful about who we allow in, whether they match our values, and ultimately, if they have any sympathetic nature with terrorism, obviously they don't belong in the country.
Exactly. Out the door, sorry, you don't have an invitation. Now, Lyle, why is it that Labor is unable to handle anything vaguely related to immigration?
Well, Chris, I think it's because fundamentally they believe in open borders. Certainly the radical left of Labor don't believe there should be nation states. So that pressure is exerted upon the parliamentary party and the caucus, and it starts to reflect in their policy positions. Also, I think there's misguided compassion. We saw that with Jason Clare today, talking about hospitals being blown up, but forgetting to say that the terrorists actually hide in the hospitals.
Yes.
And if it wasn't for Hamas shamefully using human shields, there wouldn't be people being blown up. So Labor is full of misguided compassion. They don't really believe in the nation state, and this translates into policy.
Exactly. I think you've hit it on the head. Now, Australian psychiatrists have led the biggest ever worldwide study into youth mental health, finding that young people's psychological health has entered a dangerous phase. They cite economic insecurity and political and tech changes as the cause. Really, Alex?
Well, it's interesting, you know, I think youth starts at home and at school, and those two institutions don't agree with each other much anymore. When we went to school, if you got into trouble at school, you wouldn't tell your parents because they'd support the school system. So we've got this split, we've got this expectation that the students become the customer, and that changes the very nature of the framework of schooling. So I think that creates the wrong principles. I think there's a lack of accountability and behaviour. I don't think schools know how to handle misbehaviour in any way that they can feel comfortable.
Not at all.
And I think that's the beginning of a real problem. Students become customers. It's happened at school, it's happening at universities. And I think we've let that slip. Most of us had far less choice than kids have today, and that was easier because we had less expectation. All of that contributes to the position, but at the core of it, Chris, is the smartphone. That is the one thing that's created antisocial behaviour. It's allowed kids to look at other children through that lens and say, why can't I have that? And it's creating all the wrong principles. And I think we need to build resilience. We need to have a better structure and discipline around the school system and at home, and they need to support each other.
Kevin Donnelly raised the difficulty of devices and taking over the minds of children as well in the interview we've already run. You're spot on. Lyle, I wonder how much of this is more due to how vulnerable kids are from the education system that we know from today's results are failing them.
They're very vulnerable, Chris. Education has become more about indoctrination. I'm sure Kevin Donnelly's made that point many times. Well, I know he has many times. And we're seeing this gender fluid ideology right from early childhood learning. That's part of the Albanese government's curriculum. It's right through the whole school system, through to university. And then you've also got a generation of kids who are locked out economically as well. So there's no hope of them being able to purchase a house because inflation is through the roof. We've got net zero policies, which are driving the cost of everything up. And we've got the World Economic Forum telling them you will own nothing and be happy. So there's not a lot of incentive to succeed at school. They're being indoctrinated, not educated, and they're not given any hope for when they do leave school.
Yeah, true. Alex, I want to talk about unions. This government bill to install an administrator within the CFMEU, the Labor minister gets overriding control. It's a scam, isn't it?
Well, the real problem with this is that this has only arisen publicly because the media kept pushing the story. And it's clear that this has been going on for some time. So why is it that the government didn't act on this earlier than having to act on it because of the media's position? Chris, the other issue is that it's systemic corruption. It's clear that that's the case. But here's the thing. A lot of private builders, private operators, private contractors are being cut out of roles. Now, in a proper society, unionism has a place when it fits properly. But actually, in this case, it's locking out employment. It's locking out private enterprise. In an era where we've got a housing crisis, how do we adjust for that other than to bring a bipartisan group together, probably a Senate committee, to look at the impact of this, not just within the union, but the impact it's having on productivity in private sector, in the building and construction area. It's a real issue for Australia, and it's a chance to really start to address it.
Yeah, bipartisan, that word doesn't seem to be...
I know, but we can't give up on it.
Yeah, OK. Turning to Liberal Party politics, this story has broken this afternoon, Lyle. Dozens of New South Wales Liberal candidates won't be able to run for the party in the upcoming council elections in safe Liberal seats and the South Coast, which of course is critical for giving Peter Dutton a chance at the next election. And it's because someone forgot to submit the paperwork. This sounds like the kind of stuff that they did leading up to the federal election. They stuffed up those candidacies as well.
Well, that's right, Chris. In the lead up to the federal election, of course, that was because of factional warfare going on and Scott Morrison and Alex Hawke trying to withhold pre-selections to shoehorn their favoured candidates in. Who knows what is going on behind the scenes here in local government. But it's a real worry because you've got the radical left, including the Greens political party, pretty much hijacking local government right around the country and, of course, using it as a platform for, anti-Israel sentiment. We really do need a strong Conservative point there. The fact that Liberals can't get their act together is really doing a disservice to the whole community.
Yeah, the timing couldn't be worse. The timing could not be worse. Now, the government's Made in Australia bill, which is basically a green project on subsidy steroids, it's in a bit of strife. The opposition doesn't want a bar of it, and you can understand why, can't you, Alex?
Well, I think in a world that's internationally based, to say Australian-made, presuming that our wage structure and economy as it sits can't compete in the way in which this economy is being run. So that's the first problem. The second is all of this green area of conversation, people aren't listening anymore. This is a big threat to this government, that all we do is talk about it. We as a milestone, talk about how many billions of dollars we're going to spend. And we have all the big ideas, almost like an ABC comedy series, but actually nothing is happening. And I think this is the problem for this government. Pick a goal, narrow it down and achieve it. Don't talk in riddles and in breadth where you can't achieve those goals in any reasonable time frame. And now that there is this debate with the opposition coming through with nuclear power, I think people are pausing and saying, we want to hear this debate because at least someone's bringing up another option that could be a very good option.
I think you have nailed that, Alex. This could actually be a very high traction policy for Dutton in that he's proposing something that, OK, he's admitting that it doesn't necessarily know what the screws and bolts are all about just yet, but there's technology into the future that we should at least look at. And when you're looking to try and find an answer to people's power bills, Alex, why not look at something that is got possibility, that has legs? It's
the gutsiest opposition position I've seen at this stage of an election cycle.
Yeah.
He could have said very little and allowed, as you normally do, allow the government to fall over and win in opposition. He's actually taken a really gutsy step. And I think people have forgotten that leadership's about standing up for something, backing it, and continuing on no matter the consequence. And I think Dutton's proven that. And I think this could be, finally, a debate that this nation has to have in relation to how we move forward.
And it's good that the major parties aren't, preaching from the same pulpit on the same policies.
That's right.
Lyle, NAPLAN results. I've spoken to Kevin Donnelly. I just wanted to get your understanding of all of this. Do you think we've got the leadership to turn this around? Because if we're sitting at about, 20 to 25 in the world on international academic charts, we are not heading up that chart. We are only going to head further downwards, and the $600 billion of Gonski funding is not going to make a skerrick of difference.
No, that's right, Chris. And look, I've been around watching politics not quite as long as you, but the Gonski reforms were a massive deal during the Gillard era. We've thrown billions at education. Clearly, funding's not the issue. We've got well-funded education. I think unless we're willing to grapple with the hard issues that kids have to learn their timetables. They've got to learn phonics. They've got to do the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. And we've got to stop the indoctrination in our schools, the gender fluid ideology, the anti-colonialism rhetoric that goes on that makes kids feel ashamed of being Australian. All of this clutter that's in the curriculum that's not to do with the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic, that has to be changed. But until someone has the leadership and the courage to say to the teachers' unions and to the education establishment that we've got to get back to basics, I think we're going to continue to languish at the bottom of the league tables. And it's a real worry because they're not languishing in Asia. Our competitors in our part of the world are moving ahead. They've got well-educated kids. They're moving ahead with technology. We really risk being left behind if we don't grapple with this. And money is not the primary problem.
And changing this kind of culture in this country, in a bureaucracy, is not an easy project, let me tell you. Lyle Shelton, Alex Malley, great to have you on the program. Thank you to you both.